Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Michael Benson. Eddie Hearn has stated that Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano is almost set for April at Madison Square Garden in New York. Taylor must first beat Firuza Sharapova on Saturday, and Serrano must first beat Miriam Gutierrez next week. Both very interesting contests, interesting fights, intended to serve as preludes to their inexorable showdown. You think about Serrano versus Gutierrez, and Amanda Serrano's boxing really is levels above Miriam Gutierrez's boxing. Skill for skill, it's obvious that Amanda
She operates at a higher level than Miriam.
I mean, I think that's obvious, that Amanda Serrano, skill for skill, is a better boxer than Miriam Gutierrez. Amanda's no stranger to the lightweight division. She's held the title there before. She's held the title as high up as 140 pounds. Super lightweight.
Miriam Gutierrez would be a common opponent between them.
Katie Taylor beat Miriam Gutierrez, her then mandatory challenger, in November of last year. Miriam has since rebounded in November of this year, and she's going to be now facing Amanda Serrano this month.
There are people out there that think Amanda can stop Katie.
Ahead of this fight with Miriam Gutierrez and ahead of what could be her showdown with Katie Taylor, there are people out there that think Amanda has enough stopping power to stop Katie Taylor, and that's what makes this fight interesting. Miriam Gutierrez would be a common opponent between them, though that's just a triangle theory, and we know triangle theories, they don't work. Styles make fights.
Miriam being a common opponent between them isn't all that relevant.
It's not really what you have to pay attention to. What you got to pay attention to is Miriam Gutierrez's style, which is a bit rough around the edges, a bit crude. She's nowhere near as experienced as Amanda or Katie.
For those people out there that think Amanda can stop Katie Taylor,
this fight and Miriam Gutierrez, she will be a good gauge for Amanda's power. Amanda's power as a lightweight. Miriam Gutierrez, God bless her, she's there for the punches. I reiterate, she's rough around the edges. She's not an in-and-out, stick-and-move, elusive fighter. Not an elusive opponent for an Amanda Serrano. So Amanda's going to get the chance to nail her.
Miriam really isn't a tricky fighter.
She's a solid fighter, and you could argue she's a naturally bigger woman than Amanda Serrano. You could argue that, even though Amanda's no stranger to the lightweight division. Better still, Miriam Gutierrez is a solid fighter, but not a tricky fighter. So Amanda will get the chance to use her power.
And that's where things get interesting.
For all those people out there that think Amanda Serrano has enough stopping power to stop a Katie Taylor, if she goes in there with Miriam Gutierrez and she can't secure the knockout, what does that say about the Taylor fight? Miriam Gutierrez is nowhere near as elusive as a Katie Taylor. Nowhere near as fleet of foot. She ain't got feet like Katie.
For all those people out there who think Amanda can stop Katie, what happens if she doesn't stop Miriam?
She didn't stop Jamie Mercado at 126 pounds, the featherweight division, what Amanda has described as her natural weight and her best weight.
Jamie Mercado moved up from 122 to 126 pounds for that fight.
Amanda Serrano won a clear victory over Jamie Mercado. Make no mistake, she did. But what she didn't do was stop her. She couldn't stop Jamie Mercado, who moved up from 122 pounds to 126 pounds. This fight with Miriam, this fight is at 135 pounds.
Katie's division.
I mean, essentially what I'm getting at is there are a lot of people out there who feel like Amanda Serrano can win that Taylor fight and win that fight through strength of arms. Win that fight with her power and knock out Katie Taylor. But she didn't knock out Jamie Mercado, who's a naturally smaller woman than Katie Taylor and nowhere near as elusive.
She didn't knock out Jamie Mercado.
And what if she doesn't knock out Miriam Gutierrez?
I think that would decrease the likelihood of her knocking out Katie Taylor.
You see, the way I look at it is, if you could knock out Jamie Mercado at 126 pounds, and you can't knock out a Miriam Gutierrez at 135 pounds, the likelihood of you knocking out Katie Taylor...
It's not likely at all, not if you couldn't knock them out.
Those girls, they're good fighters. They're good fighters in their own respect. They're both solid, but those girls, they're nowhere near as elusive as Katie Taylor. Nowhere near as hard to hit. Nowhere near as hard to find. So if you can't knock them out...
They're not even all that hard to find.
Then how are you going to knock Katie out? She's got better feet and better defense than these girls. She can make herself hard to find in that ring. Make herself a hard target. If you can't knock out the likes of a Jamie Mercado at 126 pounds or a Miriam Gutierrez at 135 pounds, then how the hell are you supposed to knock out Katie Taylor?
For the people that think she can knock out Katie, that's the question.
Here now, I don't know that Amanda will or won't knock out Miriam Gutierrez. That's what makes the fight interesting, because if she does knock out Miriam Gutierrez, that will essentially mean that her power did carry to the weight. It did carry up to 135 pounds, and at minimum, she can stop the likes of a Miriam Gutierrez.
Yeah, if she actually knocks her out.
But we don't know here now if she will or won't, and that's what makes that fight interesting, gauging Amanda's power as a lightweight ahead of what could be a Katie Taylor fight. A Katie Taylor showdown set to go down in the spring of next year. Those people out there who feel that Amanda's got enough stopping power to stop Katie Taylor, let's first see if she can stop Miriam Gutierrez.
And if she can, maybe you're onto something. Maybe.
But if she can't stop a Miriam Gutierrez, who's nowhere near as fleet of foot, nowhere near as hard to find as Katie, if she can't stop her, I myself would not bank on a knockout. I would not bank on Amanda stopping Katie if she can't stop a more stationary target in Miriam. Let's see what happens next week. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Bob Arum on George Kambosos Jr.
I don't think he's top caliber. He fought a Teofimo Lopez that should have been in the hospital, not in a boxing ring.
You won't find very many sympathetic ears for Teofimo Lopez at this time because most are looking at this as a self-inflicted wound. It was Teofimo Lopez himself that prioritized the bag as it were. That's why he didn't want to let Top Rank do the fight. He didn't like how they priced it. That's why the fight ended up going to a purse bid. That's how Triller ended up winning the bid, defaulting. Then the fight went to Matchroom, who placed the second highest bid. All of this happened as a result of Teofimo Lopez.
That's why there aren't too many sympathetic ears right now.
You won't find too many at this time to the plight of Teofimo Lopez, though Bob Arum, he seems sympathetic, and what he's saying is the version of Teofimo that George fought.
He was lucky he wasn't dead.
Per an article published by ESPN's Mark Kriegel, doctor says Teofimo Lopez is lucky he's not dead after boxer found to have fought with air inside his chest. Teofimo Lopez was risking his life and should have been in the hospital rather than a boxing ring when he lost his 4 lightweight belts to George Kambosos last week at Madison Square Garden. According to a doctor who subsequently examined him and reviewed his medical records, he could have died for sure, said Dr. Linda Dahl,
an otolaryngologist
with surgical privileges at 3 Manhattan hospitals. How he breathed, I can't even explain to you. It's like somebody tied a 300-pound set of weights around his chest. His neck and his chest were in a vice. That's how he fought. He's lucky he's not dead, said Peter Constantino, executive director of the New York Head and Neck Institute. I mean, really lucky. According to Lopez's medical records, the 24-year-old former undisputed champion was diagnosed with pneumodiastinum.
It's pneumomodiastinum.
Whatever. With extensive air in the retropharyngeal space by emergency room doctors during his post-fight visit to Bellevue Hospital. The air was surrounding his chest wall and his heart and his neck, places where air is not supposed to be, said Dahl, who worked as ringside physician for the New York State Athletic Commission. If he was hit in the neck, in the chest, a certain way, in a certain place, he could have developed pneumothorax, a collapsed lung. He would have instantly been down and unable to breathe and needing a chest tube. The likely cause of the air, according to Dahl and records of physicians who saw Lopez later at New York Presbyterian Hospital, was a small tear in his esophagus. Lopez, whose diagnosis was complicated by his long-time asthma and a case of COVID he contracted in June, began experiencing shortness of breath and swelling in the neck area on Friday, shortly before the weigh-in. I thought it was just my asthma, said Lopez, when asked why he didn't divulge his symptoms to his manager or the Athletic Commission during his pre-fight examination on Friday. I fought through asthma before. If I told everybody, they would have canceled the fight, but I chose not to. Because of the amount of pressure I was under, I didn't want to hear people say, "Oh, another postponement." Dahl, who worked for the New York State Athletic Commission between 2004 and 2008, said Lopez's condition wouldn't have become apparent in the routine pre-fight exam conducted right before last Friday's weigh-in. If you listen with your stethoscope, as I did on Monday, his lungs sounded fine, she said. There's no way anybody could have diagnosed this without knowing how severe his symptoms were. There's an X-ray and a CAT scan. After the weigh-in, Lopez and his team, minus his customary nutritionists, perfecting athletes, went to the restaurant Carmine's to rehydrate and replenish. That's where his symptoms took a marked turn for the worse. It didn't get bad until I started rehydrating, Lopez said. Lopez's parents, including his outspoken father and trainer Teofimo Sr., said they figured he might be suffering from acid reflux or dehydration from the weight cut. I took a seat in the back of the restaurant, by the kitchen, Lopez recalled. Everybody's trying to burp me and relax me. They see my neck is swollen. My voice changed. At this point, everybody's a little concerned. I think my dad told me I should go to the hospital, and I said no, because they're going to end up probably canceling the fight. After returning to the hotel, they tried a variety of prospective remedies: Gatorade, hot tea, club soda, Pepsid, Tums, and hot towels. Nothing worked.
So essentially, he was a lot less than 100% going into that fight. That's what they're saying.
And that's likely why in the first round, Teofimo ran across the ring from his corner like a bat out of hell. He wanted to go home early.
Hurry up and get that knockout so you can go to the hospital.
Post-fight, he was told he could not fly, and he was directed to check in immediately to New York Presbyterian, Cornell Medical Center. Doctors there confirm the pneumomediastinum diagnosis. He was discharged Thursday morning and advised not to fly for at least 2 weeks. I don't know how he went 12 rounds without being able to breathe, Dahl said, but he has air where it's not supposed to be, and it's dangerous for him to get on a plane. Although Lopez was scheduled to have earned almost $3.2 million for the Kambosos fight, the lead-up marked an excruciating period in his young life. In August, he separated from his wife of just 2 years. In October, he said he spoke of thinking about killing himself on at least 3 occasions this past year. The same month, his family, whom he supports and has frequently feuded with, his wife, moved in with the young fighter. He left for New York on November 20th, just 4 days after seeing his newborn son. By fight week, Lopez said he had only about $20,000 left to his name.
Jesus, what the hell they do? Spend all the Lomachenko money?
In a nutshell, what we're reading here is that Teofimo Lopez was very much in a bad way going into that George Kambosos Jr. fight. It's because of this that Bob Arum doesn't even think of George as being a world-class guy. He doesn't think of him as being a world-class fighter. He attributes George's victory over Teofimo to Teofimo's medical condition at the time he went into that fight. And that's understandable. That's all well and good, but I still look at that as a self-inflicted wound. You wouldn't have whittled all the money you made with Vasil Lomachenko away. You wouldn't have ended up...
This fight wouldn't have taken this long to make if it wasn't for Teofimo and his people.
Teofimo very recently took to social media himself, stating something about being under pressure, the pressure that athletes face, that only other athletes can relate. Be that as it may, that's pressure that you put on yourself because it's your fault this fight took this long to make. That was you and your team's decision to hold out for more money and let somebody else do the fight, only for the fight to get postponed several times, only for Triller to end up defaulting, and only for Matchroom to end up picking up the fight a year.
There's a whole goddamn year between the Lomachenko fight and the Kambosos fight. Whose fault is that?
It didn't have to be that way. Teofimo Lopez himself took to social media and stated, parentheses, only athletes understand the amount of pressure we deal with on a daily basis. My health isn't an excuse, but a fact. I almost died for people who could care less about us, but only money.
Wait a minute.
You didn't almost die for people who only care about money. You almost died because you only care about money. It was your pursuit of a bigger purse that led you here in the first fucking place. You could have let Top Rank do the fight, and the fight would have been one and done months ago. You knew you were struggling to make the weight.
So did your father.
Your father, who post-fight admitted his mistake was leaving you at 135 for too long.
Let's not try to ascend a martyrdom over here.
From the moment that Teofimo Lopez, his father, and David McWater turned a mountain into a molehill over this fight, from the moment they started raising a stink about how much Top Rank was going to give them for this fight,
You assume the responsibility of everything that happens thereafter because it was your fault.
we cannot diminish, belittle, or berate George Kambosos' victory over Teofimo Lopez's medical condition any more than we could belittle or berate Teofimo's victory over Vasil Lomachenko, who went into their fight with a shoulder injury.
People wondered why the guy spent the first 5 rounds not throwing any punches.
It turns out it was as a result of that nagging shoulder injury, which didn't all of a sudden show up in the Teofimo Lopez fight. We'd heard about the injury in the past. We'd heard about the injury before.
Not the first time we heard about Loma's shoulder.
And if Vasil Lomachenko's shoulder situation was no excuse for him losing to you, then your situation is no excuse for you losing losing to George.
So that works.
You think I want to kick this guy when he's done? I don't. I don't want to kick this kid when he's done. I really don't. I have some sympathy for the severity of his medical condition and what he was going through at that time, though all these fighters, all of them, have their own personal baggage. And Teofimo's is a self-inflicted wound. It is a situation that he created because he was prioritizing the bag. Him and his team. He was prioritizing money. He wasn't thrust into that situation due to...
Listen, it never had to take this long.
If it did, it's because Teofimo Lopez, his father, and David McWhorter, they wanted more money for the fight. More money than Top Rank was willing to put up because Top Rank knew then it's not a big fight. Now, if the fight's profile happened to grow over time, if it did, it's because the fight was taking so long to make. It's because so much time was passing in between the Vasily Lomachenko fight and the George Kambosos title defense. By the time the fight actually rolled around, of course it had more of a profile.
More of a profile than it had initially.
That's because it had time to grow. But why did it have time to grow?
Oh, well, you guys were holding out for more money. That's how that happened.
Didn't happen on its own. Didn't happen by itself. If the fight took that amount of time to make, it's because you and your team were holding out for more money, even though you knew you were struggling to make the weight.
You gotta show some accountability.
If Teofimo Lopez is in fact better than what he showed against George Kambosos Jr. that night, he's got to prove it, because what he can't do is rewrite history, and what he can't do is guilt trip everyone into thinking that...
What, we're supposed to look down on George's victory over you because you were struggling to make the weight because you were sick? That's your own fault.
Teofimo Lopez, he's moving up to 140 pounds, and it's conceivable that once he gets there, Top Rank may decide to put him in a sink or swim situation, because there are no shortage of capable fighters at 140 pounds, and some of them are on the Top Rank side of things. One is Jose Pedraza.
Another's Arnold Barboza, who's taken special interest in Teofimo Lopez.
Teofimo Lopez was gone on to say that in spite of the loss he just suffered and the mistakes that his team have made, he's not getting rid of his dad. And you know what? That's fine. He doesn't have to get rid of him, but he needs to supplement the effort, and more importantly, he needs to show some accountability. He needs to show that he can learn from this mistake by atoning for it.